What's up, Mixed Church?
Yo,
And
yo.
happy Sunday. This week we are finishing up our sermon series, If Love Was a Plane. Last week, Jake and I stressed how important it is to have people in your life that you can lean on, that you can get wisdom and insight from. So this week, we want to share with you a conversation that we had with 3 married couples in our church.
Yeah, and as an audience, we invited some engaged couples to lean into the conversation. And our goal today is really just to share some testimonies of some amazing people who have been following Jesus and experiencing life together through marriage. If you've been a part of Mixed Church over the last couple months, you've heard me use the word repentance quite a few times, and just the change of our minds and our outlooks. And so my hope is that for you, if you're in a relationship, want to be in a relationship, been married for a year or a long time, that maybe just today will cause you to pause and reflect and seek God's guidance on how he wants to change your mind towards your relationship. So with that, for the last time in this sermon series, I'm going to ask you to remain seated and buckle that seatbelt because we are about to take off. Well, what's happening, Mixed Church? Here we are with some amazing individuals that we have a privilege of just gleaning so much wisdom, and if not wisdom, just stories. Quick introductions from my left to the right. We have Ken and Kathy Tureen. We have Mel and Dom Turnipseed. And then last but not least, Austin and Steph Granlick. To get us rolling here this morning, I would just love for y'all to just share a couple of pieces of information with us. Number one, how long you have been married. And then number two, what is the most bothersome thing your spouse does? And if you need time to think, should we go first?
I can go.
Wow, immediate.
Locked and loaded. Okay, go ahead, Jackie. How long have we been married?
5 years.
Okay.
And the most bothersome thing that you do is you have very selective hearing. So, like, I think when you hear my voice most of the time, it's like gone off. We turn it off. And then I have to say, like, a few times, babe, hey, babe, Jake, anybody? So that would be it.
I'm focused on obeying your previous command. That's what I'm doing. I'll go. The most bothersome thing that Jackie does is she has a shaker cup that for whatever reason she refuses to wash. And so I do it out of loving kindness because I'm patient, I'm kind. I have a perspective of love.
How long have you guys been married?
35 years.
Woo!
Yeah.
Come on.
Consecutive.
27.
Consecutive.
Hey, that's awesome. That's amazing.
When Ken is driving the car, you are not permitted to touch any controls whatsoever.
Even the
Temperature, music.
Oh, wow.
Even your own window. Yeah. So it's kind of.
Has this been a problem for 35 years?
It has.
Oh, wow.
When we first started dating, it was, you have not earned your window privileges yet.
Yeah.
So
Have you earned your window
I
privileges?
still haven't.
That's
won.
okay.
No.
I let her once, and then it was so bad that I took them back. So,
Ken, is there something that Kathy does that is bothersome?
you know what? And we've joked about this for a long time. Kathy is a sniffer.
What is
And sinus,
Oh,
she sniffs and sniffs and sniffs endlessly. And it's kind of like living next to the airport where you stop hearing the planes.
let's go to Dom and Mel. How long y'all been married?
Like 8 months.
Yes.
Yes.
But we've been together for 5.5.
Nice.
So.
That's awesome.
I'll let you start.
Probably the most annoying thing, probably the most frustrating thing. Bothersome, sure, why not?
Bothersome.
actually only happened on the way here. We were at a restaurant and we ordered something. It was for lunch. And I ordered my thing, she ordered her thing, and I could almost time it as to how long I was going to have this on my plate before she would ask for what she calls a small piece. And it was a small
bite.
piece.
Just a bite.
But for me, I'm like, why didn't you just order that? And I'm like, and she'll try to fix it and be like, you want a piece of mine? I'm like, no, I don't want a piece of mine. Because I ordered,
What's yours
I
is
ordered
mine.
Yeah.
my thing.
His is like a burger with bacon and like onion rings
Lord
and
is good.
cheese, and mine's like a little salad, and he doesn't want that.
Okay, now
but
I
just
see
want a
why
bite.
he's disgruntled.
I have nothing to offer.
What about you, Mel?
I'll just put it in the category of sock etiquette. He does not like to change his socks as often as I would like him to. And he likes to keep every pair of socks that he has ever owned. They have holes in them. I literally have to throw them away when he's not home and then take the trash out to the big trash because he'll find the socks and take them out and keep using them. So I've told him, I'll buy you as many socks as you need. He says he doesn't want to what is it? You don't want to lose the freshness or something like that.
There's no healthy way of explaining it, so
No.
let's just move on. Because all right, Grand Lex.
That's fantastic. We have been married just over 10 years.
Nice,
And
well done.
the most bothersome thing that
I'm
Austin
so curious to hear
does, he has this funny habit of forgetting to check if there's a dry towel hanging outside the shower before he gets in the shower.
Yeah.
So I would say about 75% of the time I hear,
It's getting better.
"Hey, Steph," from the shower. Coming.
Sometimes I feel bad. I'm like, is there a hand towel or something near?
or I'll hear, "Allison,
Yeah.
Ellie,
She's
can you
usually
come
too
give me a
small
towel
though.
before Mom hears?"
What about you, Austin?
That's good. So mine's kind of like yours, Ken, where it was like you're kind of used to the planes flying by. I was actually thinking about this, and I was like, oh, this is a good one. So when Steph is brushing her teeth, normal people, they're brushing, and then like some people have their mouths open, some have them closed. That's a whole nother discussion. She's a mouth open.
The entire time?
Yeah. But either way. But while she's brushing her teeth, like when like the toothpaste kind of foams up, and you spit it out, and then that's it. Steph will just lean over, and it just kind of, it's like lava, like
drip
coming out of a
out.
volcano, and then it'll go down the arm, and I'm exaggerating a little bit.
It's like,
I feel like there's some
Very dramatic.
exaggeration happening.
But sometimes I'll like walk in and be like, well, your hands are clean.
And then I use a towel.
Yeah.
all right, I feel like I know too much about all of you now. Joshua Liebman, who is an American Reform rabbi, and he authored a book called Peace of Mind. He said this about marriage, quote, "And they lived happily ever after is one of the most tragic sentences in literature. It's tragic because it is a falsehood. It is a myth that has led generations to expect something from marriage that is not possible." First couple questions for today. Number one, what do you think Joshua Liebman was getting at? And then in line with that, have you experienced the truth of his words firsthand? And if so, how?
I've always wondered where we came up with the idea that everything should be fine and perfect, going well. And if it's not, we're doing something wrong. And that's just such a lie. Life is going to happen. And only by hanging on to God every single day and staying open to submitting to each other, are you going to be able to get through all of those times.
Yeah. Was that something? I mean, as you think back, you guys obviously have been married for a while. I want to be careful not to say a long time, but 35 years, that's amazing. It's a testimony for sure. Like, is that something that did you learn that 20 years ago and now you're good, or is that something you continue
It's
to?
like it's almost like you continually learn that, and
Yeah.
you get, we come into our marriage with all this baggage from each,
Yeah.
and you it's going to take you a lifetime,
Right.
even if you can get it done and
Yeah.
fixed by then,
Yeah.
but you just have to keep working at it, and you get better and better at putting your emotions aside that kind of hijack your relationship,
Yeah.
and you learn how to just tuck your head up underneath and just go into the wind, and you just gotta stick it out together. But it's going to suck. There's going to be a lot of times that there's just no other word for it. It just really does.
Yeah.
Yeah, just going further off of that, like not even like when it's bad. Sometimes it's just like dull too. And that's nothing against you or any relationship. Sometimes I feel like it's like almost a bad thing to say, but like I think most people, when they think of like happily ever after, it's like a feeling or an expression.
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
especially if you're not in it, you're like, oh, they have so much happiness, like the fairy tales on them. But it's like there's a lot of like dull moments to the point where like I almost feel like we're usually in our best spot when it's just like we're comfortable being like quiet around each other, or even like we'll do like an example would be like we've had dates where we call them our business dates where we'll go out to eat, and then like I'll pull out an Excel sheet. I'm like, all right, let's talk about our budget. And, and like I don't know if you'd call that happily ever after if you're defining happy as a feeling. We'll happily do it because we know how much it matters. But I think that's kind of what he's getting at.
Yeah.
One thing we've learned over time, we weren't always good at this, but I think social media has made this harder.
Sure.
That when it's good, it's important to really enjoy it being good. That your time is coming. Something bad's around the corner.
Sure.
It could be heartache, it could be loss of a family member, illness, financial difficulty. Something's coming.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you guys bring that up, like the social media aspect of it and how that's evolved in your marriage. Do you guys find that, like, obviously us and stuff, you've been married for 10 years, but in almost a year, like how that has evolved and like challenged in any way?
I mean, I think I don't think there's been an evolution of it. Like, I don't know that social media has changed so much in the last 5 years, but I will say that I think that it's there's so many things with social media that have been great for us to be able to introduce just via, a photo, or families are on different coasts and things like that. But then there's people in his life still who are from seasons ago. And my insecurity is triggered when it's a friend of his who's dating his ex-fiance or something like that, or who he knows through somebody or whatever that is. And then the same thing with him. I have not gone through and deleted every picture of my ex-boyfriends because I just don't want to go that far back.
It's just too much work.
I just went far enough, and then I was like, if they're
just
going
stop
this
scrolling.
far. So there's always that. Like, I feel like it's just the kind of typical dangers of social media. Comparison's a big thing.
Yeah, 100%. I think there's such a pressure to, even obviously everybody talks about the highlight reel, everyone's Instagram is all the great stuff. But then even if things are great, I just don't post often. But then you get in your head of like, do people not know how much I love my husband because I don't post about it? And it just messes with our relationship so much in the good and the bad. And it's like just learning to enjoy the people right in front of you and use it as a tool, not as like this always has to represent me fully. Like it's never going to, good or bad. So
that's so good. So one of the things my pastor, Kyle Hammond, used to teach on a lot was this thing called the expectation gap. And it's been huge. For me personally, I think it's been huge for both of us, but it's just this simple illustration that in life, you have your expectations, And then you have your experience, typically lower than expectations. And then you have this gap that is most often filled by frustration or fear, resentment, comparison. My question is, how have you both failed and or succeeded in responding to the expectation gap in your marriage? Can you think of a time when you wrestled with the expectation gap and you had a specific expectation, it was not met, and you either, man, you guys knocked it out of the park and you adapted very quickly, or you spent maybe, a second, a day, a season where you were wrestling with that gap between your expectation and your experience?
At least for me, my expectation gap was a little different because before Mel and I were before we were married, I was engaged in 2014, going into 15, and just that whole situation. Long story short, between the fact that I had came from arguably one of the grossest examples of marriage all of my life. In every season, I really didn't have any kind of masculine example of what that looked like in terms of marriage for a very long time, maybe until maybe college. And then I walked into an engagement with a girl that I did love, and she did love me, but not everything that just because someone loves you doesn't necessarily mean on your best attempts that's going to work. So my expectation gap at the time that I had met Mel was actually heavy with more baggage than Southwest will let me bring on a plane, more metaphorically speaking. Well so said. My expectation gap for our marriage was actually expecting a lot of troubles from those seasons to pour themselves into our current season. Thankfully, by God's grace, the negative that I expected actually has been nothing but grace upon grace upon grace. That doesn't mean that it's not to say that the presence of those fears have been absent as much as it's to say the presence of God's grace in the face of those fears has been much more present. Again, those fears have not been absent, but those fears have been much more eclipsed by God's grace through her in the midst of that. So I think I personally have the blessing of saying it could be much worse, but I just didn't expect. I was already counting on, and we had all these conversations before, I was already counting on several, hey, I'm sorry, like the ghost of this situation, the ghost of that situation kind of came up. And it's just kind of crazy to think about like those conversations months ago, even 2 years before we got married, and now looking at it here, it is like almost a year down and being like, yo, like she's just really just killing the game in terms of helping me out with grace in this area. So I think that was a beautiful expectation, redemption. So I expected this and got this out of that.
Yeah, real quick, Mel, so he mentioned something, the ghost of that situation, the ghost of that. So did you have an expectation that you would be navigating through that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did. And I've used that expression with, sharing with other people that we would have what I would call these like ghost arguments where like I kind of was like, who are you talking to right now? I didn't say that. And I'll repeat what I said and I'll find different words, but that's not me. I actually had to sometimes like felt a little bit like I wasn't trying to treat him like a child, but where I'd almost have to be like, Dom, look at me in the eyes. I'm not saying that. I don't think that way. And he has imposter syndrome is a big thing for him, mostly in his academia, but there's parts of it that filter into our relationship. And so there are those lies, and then there's the lies that he's been told by the past relationships, and I'm arguing with that. And in those moments, it is really difficult because I feel like I don't have how do you fight? Like, how do you disagree with someone when you actually are agreeing with them? Like, I'm not thinking that. But I think that my approach was just the kindness of the Holy Spirit very early in our relationship revealed to me that I had this word of misunderstood that came up a lot in our early relationship. It took a while to know what it meant. I didn't know if we would misunderstand each other. And over time, I started to realize Dom is very often misunderstood. And so in our disagreements, I try to find how am I misunderstanding him, and and I kind of go into arguments or disagreements with like, I'm probably wrong. I'm probably misunderstanding.
Wow.
I probably need to apologize because I know like 9 times out of 10, I triggered him.
Yeah.
I didn't do something wrong, but I did trigger him. I didn't, and the words that my actions or my words hurt him, not intentionally and not even really by something I did, but by a wound that he has. And that's where I have to recognize, where it's coming from and understand him more.
That's
but
so
certainly like ghost arguments, it's definitely a thing.
Yeah. You guys might only have, 9 months underneath your belt? But I'm taking notes.
I know, I was just going to say. It's so cool to hear you guys.
Maybe I just don't understand her. Wow.
I will say most of our dating relationship was long distance, so we had to communicate very well, or we would not have survived.
This whole concept of assuming you're wrong is very new to me. I have to resonate on that a little bit.
I think one thing for me that was really interesting is meeting couples that I admired and then thinking like, oh, I hope we have a marriage like that.
Yeah.
Or I hope our marriage looks like this, which obviously there are great things and things about people's relationships that you can emulate, but just realizing like I'm a very different person than them. He's a very different person, so our relationship's going to be very different. Not even so much expecting him to be a certain way for me or any of that, but like just how we communicate and figuring out what works for us and what's healthy for us. But then also realizing that the expectations that I put on myself of the kind of wife I wanted to be or mother, like weren't necessarily even the expectations he had. And so sometimes I would be hard on myself, assuming that I was letting him down. And in reality, he was like, wait, what? Like, I don't know why you're frustrated. You're actually frustrated with yourself. I'm not even frustrated with you. So like less about him not meeting expectations and more about like learning to just communicate about that so that you have the same expectations for each other.
Mixed church, what I hope you're taking away, and I'll ask you what your thoughts are, but a couple things that I'm going to take away that stuck out to me, and I hope they stuck out to you, was like, number one, Austin, when you're just talking about like those mundane moments within marriage, I know that was true for us, like, and it caught us off guard, where you go from dating and then you're engaged and you've got the wedding rolling around, and you just have like one more thing after another that's building excitement, injecting emotion into the relationship, and then you get married, and then 3 months in, it's like, okay, there's nothing exciting approaching, and that caught me off guard. But I think, just learning to embrace the mundanity of it. And I think, like y'all were talking about those highs and lows, like there's something, coming around the bend. It's like a lot of times those mundane moments are actually quite relaxing and beautiful. What would you say?
Yeah, and I think a lot of you touched on this, but I think Austin specifically said that, that happiness isn't a feeling, right? It's not something that we're always going to feel and feel joy about what's happening. When something is around the corner, or you're going through something, or you're not meeting expectations for yourself, or feel like you're not meeting it with your spouse, it's not always going to feel great. And I feel like I say this a lot, but like expectations are a good way to guide us in like what's happening in the moment, but they don't direct ultimately where we go. Obviously God gives us those for a reason, but it always doesn't tell the whole story.
Emotions that's good. The way I was thinking about it is like, you married the person for a reason. Don't marry the season that you're in. Date the season that you're in. Good or bad. When it's good, like you were saying, like enjoy it, live it up, thank God for it. But Jesus also did make that really sober promise about problems, that you're gonna face problems. And when the problems come, don't marry those seasons either. Endure them, learn from them, look for God's grace in the story, like you guys were sharing. But don't marry them. You married that person. Just stay married to that person.
Yeah.
A turbulent time in our marriage was 2007, 2008, when we had the great plan and the right plan at the time to build a home for our family. There was going to be 7 of us living there. It was a wonderful experience, and it was beautiful, and it was exciting. And there was this plan that we're going to build it, and then down the road we'll sell it, and we'll have all kinds of equity. And we moved in August of 2008, and if you know anything about 2008, they call that the housing market crash. And we literally, 2 weeks after moving into our home, I was driving home from work, and the builder had put up a billboard in the front of our subdivision that said huge discounts on lots. And I just tell you, that's probably not good. But that led to upside down on a home, financial pressures like we had never felt before, a business that was challenged. I didn't know what to do, and I tried to fix it for too long. And it's probably one of the biggest mistakes I've made in our marriage. I don't know if it was pride or what, but I just thought I could fix it. And the problem just got worse and worse and worse. And when I finally shared that with Kathy, just the absolute depth that it had gotten to, God gave her a wonderful idea.
I mean, Kenny, as we've all heard now, after the fact, so many other people went through that same situation that he went through. And I was working at our church in the youth ministry, not making a whole lot at that time. And he's like, Kath, we got to find something for you. We need some extra income. And I was done at the church at that time, and all of a sudden it just popped in my head to do a daycare. I knew a lady in our town of Pewaukee who had a daycare for teachers, kids in our community for about 10 years. I went to her house and I looked at everything. She was wonderful, gave me all kinds of instructions, and it just naturally happened, and it was beautiful. We had 11 years of income, and I got to stay home and be there for our own children too. So God just took a Titanic sinking ship and just really, really turned it around for us.
Here's a little something that Jesus said about marriage in Mark chapter 10, verses 7 through 8. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate. Question number 1, what is the process? What does this process look like in your marriage? And the process being that of going from independent, autonomous individuals and evolving into one cohesive team or unit. What does that look like? Has it been difficult, easy? How has it changed you? Yes, please share.
I feel like Dom has something on his mind. He's looking at Mel.
I will start off by saying I love my in-laws as my own parents, and love Mel's family as my own, because they, in a lot of ways, have brought me in, especially with the pandemic, that they went above and beyond the call of duty in a lot of ways to really treat me like a son long before the ring was on the finger. That said, me and Mel knew from the jump that we were going to be a different type of marriage, not because there was anything wrong with her parents' examples or her brother-in-law and her sister's example, but more so we just knew who we were, and we were secure in that. And we, from the jump, had a very healthy view of how do we be secure in our relationship in a way that recognizes differences around us and not make value judgments about those different types of marriages. So you have marriage A and marriage B, and we're going to be marriage C, and we're going to take something from A and B, but we didn't marry A and B. We are C.
From, even before we were married, just having the conversations about like, what did we see that we want to take and emulate, and what did we see that maybe isn't going to work for us, and having those conversations before marriage, and then in every season, continually in marriage. Like, is this still working for us? Like, how do we want to do things? What kind of parents do we want to be? What kind of parents of teenagers are we going to be? How are we going to handle all this? So very intentionally figuring out what works for us and what looks healthy for us. And a bit, again, back to expectations, it might not be what we thought, but like, what is God calling us to in for us? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think Stephen Furtick has a quote where it's like, chew the meat but spit out the bones. Like, there's so many examples that we have. Where it's just like, all right, we like that, we don't like that.
Yeah. Have you guys had to have tough conversations with your families or your previous families, your parents, about what that looks like now that we are a family?
One for us, first, the verse, like a word I keep thinking of, it just comes from another verse, kind of saying the same thing, where it's like, it talks about a man should leave his father and mother and cling to his wife, and just like that idea of like defaulting to her. Like, what are we going to do as a family unit? Would be holidays. So like, we never really like thought much about them when we got married. I mean, like, we got married around on Christmas, and then it was just like, all right, holidays are here. We're going to both sides of the family. So her family lives like an hour away. Mine live a half hour away. And so we kind of made it work. And the next year, we're like, whew, that was a lot, but it's family. That's what you do. So like, it's for like Christmas and Easter and stuff. So we saw both sides of the family whenever those big holidays came around. And then all of a sudden, it just kind of got to this point where we're like, this is asking a lot of us. And like, we had this discussion where it was like, who gets to determine this? Like, do we, or are we just going to do what everyone wants us? And we're popular, both sides of the family want us, but everyone wants us. But what do we want? Like as us, let's have a discussion about it. And so now we alternate every Christmas and Easter, and then every other holiday, like, we just decide. And that's not out of disrespect. In fact, some holidays we just go visit our families out of the blue or plan something. But that's just like something we've practically that we've done.
Yeah. I think of how do you navigate big decisions where it's a decision that's going to impact both of you, your entire family? What does that look like?
We've had a lot of those like bigger discussions. If we're not immediately on the same page, we don't sit there and hash it out. We just go, okay, let's just take a couple days. Let's both think about it. Let's both pray about it. And I would say 95% of the time we've come back with the same. Once we've just taken some time without our emotions involved and like prayed about something, we both come back and realize we're on the same page. And if not, it's usually that process of praying about it has us much more open-handed, where we're willing to discuss more and compromise more easily. But also, there's been a few situations where like we just don't come to an understanding, but we're both in that place. And then I know, and I have no problem submitting and understanding that like whatever he feels led to, like what direction he feels led to take us in, I know that it's a prayerful one. I know that he's like submitted it to God. And so like I trust him, and I also know he's doing something that he believes is best for us, not what's best for him. And so I know that like I'm not just like handing over authority. Okay, he's going to boss me around now, but like just like fully trusting that whatever decision he makes is going to be best for us. And if not, like I've got his back and he's got my back, whatever that's going to look like.
And what's cool is like, there's always a part of me that like, whenever that comes to me, whenever it gets to that point, that 5%, I'm always just like, oh man. And like, like I think God made it that way for the sake of order in the family. Like, I mean, you said like, if we ever can't decide, then I get to decide. There's also times where we just don't have time. Like, we wish we could talk it out, but we don't have time. And so we have to like make a decision. But I know like, as much as the decision's on me, like you also have a responsibility to then follow what I decide. And so it's like, takes two to make the thing go all right.
That's good. Let's go to the Dom and Mel on this one. I'd love to hear your perspective. I mean, y'all are new to marriage, but not new to a relationship. And so how is it working with you guys?
Well, I'll say this scripture is near and dear to our heart. It was actually read during our wedding, which is not a common verse
Not
to
at
read
all.
at a
It's
wedding.
like-
But I think what's really important is to remember, like you said, Jake, the duality of, we like to just harp on, women's, or like wives submit to your husbands, but there's also a challenge for husbands to love your wife like
Yes.
Christ loves the church. I would much rather have to submit to my man than to have to love someone like
Wow.
Christ loves the church.
Wow.
And so, for us to have that read over us on our wedding day, it's a promise we're making. It's a vow we're
Yes.
making that, I don't like the word earn, but it's like, if Dom is loving me the way Christ loves the church, why wouldn't I want to
Yes.
respect him and honor his direction and follow his lead? And because it's coming from a place of love, and you kind of touched on this, Steph, that we submit to God all the time, and we follow him obediently, not the way that we're not being demanded to do something. The obedience is coming from a recognition that what God has for us is better than what we would ever have for
Yes.
ourselves.
Yeah.
So I feel like what you said, Steph, when I'm like submitting to Dom, and even that language is strange, I do like the admire word, but it's coming from a place of believing that what Dom has for me and has for our relationship is far greater than I alone can do.
Yeah.
So for me, it comes from that, and it's coming from, I will promise to follow you in this way, or to submit to you. I'll just use the word, and you will honor your vow to
Yes.
love me, or at least try.
Yes.
And it's a try. It's a constant try,
Yeah.
and it's constantly laying down. I think of submission to me as like obedience and trust, and coming to every conversation with an open hand. And whatever I've brought could be taken either by the Holy Spirit or by the conversation that we have. Thankfully, we haven't had a huge decision similar to the two of you. Dom had a pretty big call in his life with school, so he told me early in our relationship, I'm going to be in school for he's literally been a student since I've known him. And he's like, this is something I have to do, and you're going to kind of come second to that sometimes. And there was an early on, the obedience or the submission, I think, was to God. That's what I felt was a call that this is the man I was going to marry. And so that was a release of a lot of dreams I had. I mean, it's a silly one, but I use it all the time. I just had big dreams to work at Disneyland. I worked there when I was younger, and I want to work there again. But I can't in the middle of the country in Milwaukee. So that's a very small thing, but there's a lot that was submitted, not necessarily to Dom, but for the sake of our relationship, for something greater than what I had.
I think for me, I don't want to add on to anything that she said, because if it's not broken, I'm not trying to fix it. And I agree that much with it. And that's an example of the submission that we're talking about right there. So how I will try to complement anything that was said, and that is through another angle of this. When we hear the word submit, we take that word as it applies to every other contractual relationship this side of heaven and put it on the only picture of the Trinity that we have this side of heaven, which is marriage. And that's not fair. And that's something that actually ends up getting I take that pretty personal whenever we as humans take words that we use with each other. A child will submit to their parent. A dog will submit to its owner. And then on a work contractual type situation, an employee will submit to their employer. That is not at all the type of submission that the biblical authors are calling us to do.
Yeah.
All of those are so contractual.
Yes.
And I would even say it's close to demonic to try to bring in something that is so vastly different.
Yeah.
It's not just a verbiage thing. It's irresponsible.
Yes.
To take something like that and try to put it in the type of description that the Lord is talking about for the woman to do to the man. And then furthermore, the only thing that I will personalize that which my wife just said and say how I say it to myself. I better at all times on my worst day, never ever give her a reason by which she can't justify submitting to me. On my worst day, I better be someone worth submitting to at all. So that's just something I own. That's good. And then furthermore, anytime that I see her sacrificing any kind of dream for me, using the analogy of her dropping Disneyland, if she drops it to pick up and move to Milwaukee, you can best believe I'm looking for every opportunity to go back and pick it back up for her out of a desire to, as she submits to me, I submit to the Lord. So I do nothing else other than look for every other opportunity to slam dunk an opportunity to be like, no, you didn't drop this for nothing. You dropped it so I can help pick it up as the Lord helps pick us up together. So that's not me trying to be preachy. That's just me trying to be like, look, at least for me, I have no excuse to do anything else other than try to be that which, on my worst day, try to be that which she can submit to safely. Because I asked her parents to give me their blessing. I asked the whole community to bless the decision. So I don't get permission to have a 5-minute, I needed this. It's like, no, in all things. Because Christ submitted to the Father for me. I have no excuse to fail in my submission to him and trying to be the type of person by which I see it so much more connectedly than that. And that is not a way I look at submission when it comes to anything else. So I am sorry if I have used submission in this, hey, musicians submit to me as your MD, or my students submit to me.
UFC language here.
I teach college students, and I'm right now like grading their papers. Hey, you submit to me as your professor. But I may use the same exact word in those contexts, but you can best believe that is not the definition of submission I'm using for my marriage.
I'm struggling right now because
I'm
I just
absorbing.
So much there. I think the thing that I'm taking away from this mix is, number one, just for us as men to really start embracing the idea of leadership as more responsibility based and less rights based. We do not, like you're saying, like we just don't have a good paradigm from a worldly perspective of what healthy leadership looks like, because leadership in our world is so rights-based. I have the right as the leader. Whereas for us men to be responsibility-based, wow, I have a heavy responsibility in this relationship to lead. What are you taking away, Jackie?
Yeah, I think on the other side of that, for women, a lot what I'm just like gathering from you guys and absorbing is just the importance of kind of what Ken talked about, like the beauty of like how we were created, but also recognizing that your responsibility is very heavy. I saw every woman's head here shake like, I'm good with you taking that. But also just the submission part is more, and I think either Steph or Mel said this is like the trust part. Like I'm trusting that you are submitting to God and the decisions that you're making. Like I'm trusting you in that. And I think we touched on duality so much, and like this submission is equal but different. And I think it will also flex in different seasons, in how it fleshes itself out and how we submit to each other and submit to God, and how that works in almost that Trinity triangle, right?
And let's not forget that right before Paul says, wives, submit to your husbands, this is what he says: submit one to another. And so whether you're in a relationship, want to be in a relationship, engaged, our amazing engaged couples here, holla, or married, like this is just a Jesus thing that we should be practicing in our regular day of life, where we are just all over the place, leaning into one another. So good, y'all.
A turbulent time in our marriage was very early on. Well, we're still early. But when we first moved to Milwaukee, the job that I got was really, really stressful. And it was also a season where I was dealing with a lot of insecurity, still am. It's a season actually we're still in. But I think we've gotten through some of the biggest bumps, or the ones that jolted us the most. And it was just a mix of stress. Dom was also experiencing a lot of stress and busyness, and we were in this strange space of being in the same apartment all the time because I worked from home, or still do, and Dom was doing schoolwork and grading papers at home. And so we found ourselves in this weird season of being in the same space but not feeling connected. And there was a lot of distractions from one another. For me, it was stress and anxiety and insecurities. And for Dom, it was kind of business and stress on him and expectations in his role. And so we've had to just kind of continually remind ourselves that we have to connect. We have to intentionally go on dates, and going out to get dinner is not a date if we don't really make it so. So we've been really trying to refocus on that and finding just simple ways to not let our lives become too busy that we forget we're married and that we're in this exciting season together. And I think, like I said, we're still kind of in that season, but we've got the tools to kind of navigate through it.
Yeah, with the insecurity part that she brought up, ended up being like this occupational insecurity by which she didn't feel like she had much control at work. And then the lack of connectivity that we would experience from our respective occupational roles. One thing led to another that just resulted in us not connecting. And then whenever something would pop off, that lack of connection and the insecurities would result in us not being able to communicate as much as we want. That will lead to her feeling like the occupational insecurity, that she didn't have control there. Now she also felt she didn't have relational control. And it just ended up being this accumulative thing. So all that on the other side of it now, and not fully on the other side of it, more so in the middle of it, and seeing the light at the other end of the tunnel, so to speak. Some people take date nights. It's more so becoming for us, we date every single day. It's just the question of, are we going to date at 6 o'clock today? Or are we going to go on a date at what time? So just prioritizing, like, yo, have we had a date moment yet today? And just take it as it comes.
One question. It's kind of a speed round. But the one question I'd love for you to answer is, if there's one thing that you could go back to, maybe when you're single, engaged, early year of marriage, whenever the timeline is, but one thing that you could change that would positively impact your marriage, either at that time or maybe would positively impact you now. What's one thing that you would change? And the hope here is that perhaps it will prevent someone from maybe making the same mistake or going, through the season that you might have gone through.
This is really easy for me because it's actually, I think, manifesting a little bit in our relationship, our marriage now, but I would have spent a lot more time working on my own insecurities that have absolutely nothing to do with the partner that I have or anything. It's completely my own insidious insecurities that have made their way into our marriage. And it's become probably one of the most difficult things we've had to navigate because it's completely something I have to work on. And so I'm doing a lot of that work now.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, my husband is experiencing that.
Yeah.
And that's a lot. I wish I had taken the time, like when we lived 5,000 miles away from each other, whatever it was, to do that.
Yeah.
Something for me that I would do different, with all due respect to the young lady that I was engaged to, I would have asked a lot more honest questions that would have allowed me to have said the following: that I love this person, but I know I can't marry this person. And because I did not ask that question nearly as much as I should have, or more so in just being vulnerable to the point, I was just honestly afraid of being alone.
Wow.
Because of that, I went through a season with her and without her. Once I went through a season without her and having to really heal from that, that relationship I've been over for 2.5, almost 3 years, and I was still dealing with ghosts from it.
Yeah.
That it was unfair to make my now wife go through that.
Yeah.
So thankfully and blessedly and through grace, we've been able to get through a lot of it so far in this very short time we've been married. But something that I would definitely concisely say is ask myself hard questions and don't be afraid to listen to the answers of those questions simply because I'm afraid of being alone. The Lord is too good and he will honor all of those desires, but do my part and ask the hard questions. Don't just ask them, but listen to them.
Yeah.
For me, it would be early on in our marriage, we got pregnant right away, and we were parents right away. And so navigating that, I think giving myself more grace to like, I had this idea of this like God-fearing woman and what it should look like. And when I didn't meet those expectations, I was just like, well, I can't let anybody know that because I want people to see my life as like a light and be a representation of Jesus. And if I tell people I'm failing, you know, like just so in my head. And even with him of like coming home from work, I've got a newborn baby and we're newly married. I'm still trying to figure this out. And like, everything was great and I crushed it and I cleaned the house and it was like, but on the inside I was like, I'm doing a good job, right? I'm doing a good job, right? Like just giving myself grace to just be real with him.
Yep.
And also just like real with the Lord so that he can love me well, because he would actually, so that he could actually know where I was at and love me well in that, rather than putting on a facade.
The only thing I could think of, this sounds like the cop-out answer, but like part of me is like, I wish I would have just gotten saved sooner, or like chosen Jesus sooner. I mean, I only had one other like romantic relationship before Steph. And when I got saved during it, and one of the first things I realized was like it wasn't healthy, so I stepped out of it. And so like because it was like on my mind, I opened up the scripture and I read books about like what should relationships like this look like. And like a lot of books can hit that nail on the head, but if you just read your Bible, like beginning to end, it's all about love that you then bring into a marriage, which is why this series applies for anyone and everyone. So I know that's like the cheating answer, but like I look back and I'm just like, like, you know, I wish I would have known God sooner.
I remember when we were at the urologist, and very, huge lack of bedside manner, just, you guys won't have kids. And that was just, that was devastating. But he didn't know what God had in store for us. And, but one thing that did, when we were blessed with our kids, we love our kids. We ferociously love our kids. And then we kind of forgot to ferociously love each other.
Wow.
And I think if we could do something differently, it would be to make sure we took time for each other in the midst of raising these wonderful children.
For our children.
For our children.
For their sake. They need us to love each other. Better.
And I think that's probably something we would have benefited from doing differently.
I think if I could just like put one note on everything that you guys were saying was, we're practicing this as a young, couple, as a little boy now, but the best gift that we can give to him is a strong marriage. And one of the best gifts and testimonies that we can give to this world is a strong, loving marriage.
A turbulent season for us, I would say, was a few years ago. We were in a situation we were looking to buy a house and move for school districts and all that jazz. And so we had bought a house that we were going to flip. And in the process of that, everything that could go wrong went wrong. And we ended up moving out of the apartments that we were in, moving in with some friends, thinking that would be for a short amount of time. That turned into longer, so we moved in with my family, and then after a couple weeks, we moved in with Austin's family, and we ended up living with Austin's family in their basement for over 9 months with all 3 kids. And so while flipping a house, and it was just, there's a lot going on job-wise and other things as well, and I think just that expectation versus reality was really hard, and we both handled it differently and navigated things differently. And so just communicating through that, and then also we would find ourselves connecting most by complaining about what was going on, or not even complaining, but just talking about how crappy it was. And so finding ways to still enjoy each other in that season, and then also finding ways to still communicate about other things, and like not just be focused on how we were connecting through how much it sucked, and not just clinging to each other in that, but like still enjoying life and enjoying the other aspects of life.
Yeah, 'twas a turbulent season.
Well, hey, right now, Mixed Church, would you put your hands together for all of those amazing married couples and just the stories that they shared? I hope that you're encouraged and challenged by them. Right now, we're going to do something that we've never done before. The band is not going to make their way up to the stage, but in fact, we're going to roll just a little bit of background music and pose 3 questions for you to consider over the next 3 minutes, about a minute for each question. I just want to challenge you to seek the Holy Spirit and what he wants to speak to you in this moment, and then we will wrap up today's service. I hope that this sermon series has challenged you and helped you to experience and live out the love that Jesus has called us to experience.